Hello and welcome to Single Pair Radio. I'm Paul Hoppe, broadcasting from the Habron Building in Louisville on the WFPM 106.5 Forward Radio Community Network. Our programs air every Monday at 2 p.m., Tuesday at 7 a.m., and Wednesday at 11 a.m., and we also stream our show on SoundCloud. The show is a project of Kentuckians for Single Payer Healthcare in conjunction with Physicians for a National Health Program through its Kentucky chapter. We produce this program because we believe healthcare is a human right. We advocate for a national, not for profit, publicly funded, single payer healthcare system that works for everyone. The views and opinions expressed on our show are those of the speakers and not the station. Before we start today's program, Dr. Shively has a response to a comment made on a recent show on women's reproductive rights by one of our listeners.
The last program we did, there was a lady who uh, questioned our discussion about the morning after pill. And what we were actually discussing was right of consciousness. So there are some people, particularly the Catholic hospitals and Catholic physicians and pharmacists who are opposed to birth control. So that could also be under the right of consciousness as the abortion pill. But I want to emphasize that there are two separate medications. One is the taken first 5 days after intercourse. It blocks the implantation and fertilization, and it also blocks ovulation. So it's actually a birth control pill. The other pill we're talking about is actually an abortion pill, which causes the woman to have an actual abortion, and that can be taken up to the second trimester. Some people have tried using it in the early part of the second trimester. So I want to distinguish between those two.
Thank you, Dr. Shively, for clarifying that. And I want you also to know that we very much appreciate it when our listeners comment on our programs. So thank you to the listener out there. Now, for today's program, we also have Dr. Mike Flynn in the studio with us, and we're going to do yet another program on gun violence in this country, focusing on school shootings. Mike's brought in a very special guest. So, Mike,
This is Michael Flynn, a retired surgical oncologist from the University of Louisville Surgery Department. Let me begin with the usual disclaimer. Any comments I make represent my personal views and do not represent the views of the Department of Surgery or the University of Louisville. Gene?
This is Eugene Shively. I'm a retired rural surgeon from Campbellsville, Kentucky. I've been affiliated with Taylor Regional Hospital for over 40 years. What I say has nothing to do with Taylor Regional Hospital nor the Department of Surgery at the University of Louisville.
Well, our topic for today is gun violence in schools, and we have a special guest that I will introduce in just a moment after I make a statement or two. Now, gun violence in schools really not much of an issue. In 1999, the Columbine High School shooting was a rare event. And since then, this has become a very much more common issue in this country. In 2024, we had 83 school shootings. I'm going to say this again for our listeners. In 2024, we had 83 school shootings. The other comment I'd like to make before introducing our special guest is to remind our listeners that they should take the opportunity to use whatever reference source they are comfortable with or find valuable to double check the facts and the comments that we make during this program. So our special guest today is Stephen Lippmann. Stephen is a retired psychiatrist. He got his medical degree from the University of Texas and did a psychiatry residency at the University of North Carolina. Came to the University of Louisville and became a member of the academic faculty in 1976. Retired about 10 years ago, and since then has been a volunteer physician doing primary care medicine at the Family Community Clinic. Steve, we're grateful that you're willing to come on and talk about this important topic, something which unfortunately is very common in this country. If you look around the world at other first world countries, if it occurs at all, it's something that happens in single digits. So we are now going to give you an opportunity to make whatever comments you'd like to make for as long as you'd like to make them, and then the conversation will begin. So, Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is an important topic. It's wonderful that we have the opportunity to discuss this matter. It's certainly something that deserves more attention and priority. Is it relevant today? Well, just a month ago, a 14-year-old girl in Madison, Wisconsin shot up her private school, killed 2, injured 6, and 2 of them seriously. So pretty relevant, something that's happening right now. And then it's followed for days and days. What was her motivation? What did her teacher think? What did her girlfriend? Did she have a boyfriend? All this hype tells other people, oh, there's lots of shootings. I've got permission to do it myself. Maybe I could do better. Anyway, the hype certainly reinforces school shootings. And it comes down to 2 big questions. Do we really care about our kids' safety? And maybe even a harder question is, do we care for our kids more than we care for our guns? So let's talk about the evidence, whether we care for the kids better or the guns better. Let's see. Most everybody says we value our children, especially our own kids. But then that depends on what happens. So, here we are coming on Martin Luther King Day next week. And Martin Luther King Day was big on, I need to watch what you do, not what you say. He was a action speaks louder than words person. So, and that leads us into the situation. So, okay. First of all, the shocking truth is that the number one cause of death in America today of children is gunshots. Gunshots kill more kids than anything else, more than car wrecks. Think about that for a minute. A car wreck is so easily happening. Nearly every person in the entire United States rides in a car or a vehicle or walks on the street at least twice a day, to school and back or to work and back, whatever. And yet, and most of those same people rarely touch a gun. And yet more people are killed by guns than by cars. I think that's pretty amazing. There's about 11,000 kids killed per year by guns in some way or another, about a couple dozen a day. Number 2, and you already mentioned this, 83 school shootings in a year that resulted in either death or injury. Well, that comes down to about 2 per week. A little over 1 per week. Pretty amazing. Now, let's put it further into perspective before we get into the details of school shooting in general. There are over 400 million guns in America, probably more than there are people. It's been estimated that way. There are about 16 million legally sold new guns every year in this country. There are probably well over 20 million assault weapons available here. And we know about, it was in the CJ recently in our own newspaper, about 600 guns are stolen every day somewhere in the entire United States. 600 guns disappear from their owners, which is 200,000 per year. So that means a fifth of a million guns are falling into hands of somebody who steals. That's probably not the most responsible gun owners. It probably is a little more likely to be a nefarious purpose if you're stealing guns. And as long as we have this many guns, as long as we continue to not change our communal, general social attitude toward this, we'll continue to have school shootings suicide, homicide, accidents, crime, and so forth. And that's especially important if the guns are not securely stored and there's no consensus in the country that we got to do something about this, particularly if they're stored unlocked. So let's see about school violence. Let's pick it up there. So you said 83 school shootings. There were 38 children killed in those 83 shootings. 116 were injured by gunshots, and that does not count the kids that sprained their ankle, fell down the steps, slipped on the floor, fell down, got trampled, or anything else that happened. They're just talking about bullet wounds. And that means thousands, many thousands of children were exposed to the emotional trauma. Imagine yourself, so going back to school a couple of days later, they probably give you a couple of days to think it over, hype it up on the news, and then you're supposed to go back and feel comfortable. And on the news, everybody says, this is not us. What are you talking about? This is us. There's 52 weeks, and we have 83 shootings. So there you go. We got more than one shooting every week. So here it is Wednesday. There should have already been a shooting probably, or maybe there'll be two next week. But it's definitely us. Then you say, well, we're here in Louisville. Does that apply to us? Well, last year when the public school system installed their several new metal detectors on the very first day, when everybody's aware there's going to be metal detectors here, on the very first day they discover a gun. What does that tell you? How many guns were here before, or how many didn't come in today because they knew the metal detectors were coming? It doesn't exactly inspire a lot of confidence. And with a metal detector, what is that? Is that going to stop a kid that wants to run through anyway? There's not a cop necessarily sitting there waiting for you. Okay, go back a year. In 2023, there was a gun scare at Manual. That rubbed off into Olmsted Academy and no middle school. So the schools kind of shut down. Police investigated. Nobody got shot. No gun was found. So nobody got shot. But it certainly was an upset. Imagine, again, going to school the next day at No Elementary and your mom saying, have a nice day at school today, honey. And you're supposed to say, I hope they don't shoot today. And then in the same year, it's so hard to describe what is a school shooting. So, okay, last year, I guess it's 2023 now, 2 teenagers on Jefferson Street did a drive-by shooting of 4 children, killed 1. In fact, and that particular person, by the way, was in the newspaper just yesterday, is going to jail after allegedly having shot 3 people in the last 2 years. He's in jail now. But part of the point is then JCPS and the police department are kind of in a fight about who was responsible. Well, it was the kid that was. I don't think that you can't have a policeman at every bus stop every morning and every night all over the United States to protect every kid. As long as there's that many guns and they're easily available, there are going to be that many shootings. And just here for Louisville, just in particular, to know there were 193 homicides in Louisville. That's almost every day. There were 18 kids shot last year to death. 18 kids were killed. 56 were injured. So that's about 70 kids were shot last year in Louisville, Kentucky. So it's definitely within our sphere of interest. So let's talk about school violence, and we'll get right into that. First of all, it's hard to know what is school violence because every municipality defines it differently, and then every observer defines it differently. But if you just talk about school incidents versus school shootings, let's talk about the incidents. That's where maybe there's a false alarm or a fake threat or even a real threat, or they find a gun, or there's a gun discharged somehow or another without anybody getting hurt. And if it's just an incident, that means shooting without anybody killed or shot, killed or injured. And then it also includes drive-by shootings. And this is something that's happened in this country as well. You're mad at the teacher or the principal, so on Saturday night or Sunday morning, you shoot a window out of the school. Well, is that a school shooting? It's kind of like Jefferson Street bus stop shooting. Is that a school shooting? And go on from there. There was a shooting just about a month or so ago at a sports arena. So two teams were having a football game at night on Saturday or Friday night, and there was a shooting there. Well, is that a school shooting? Well, then pretty soon protecting schools becomes an even bigger issue than you can imagine. Okay. The other point, I guess, is the emotional impact of all this stuff. That it leaves you very, very troubled. So let's talk a little bit more in the history. The other doctor was saying that back in the 40s and 50s, gun incidents, not even gunshots, gun incidents in schools were rare. In my school experience, there was not rare though to have a gun in the back of your pickup truck in a gun rack, but they didn't bring the guns in the school. So they were single digits per year in the entire country. By about 1970, the numbers started to go up. By 2018, we hit into the hundreds. By 2021, when COVID started, we went up to 257 gun incidents in the school. In the last 3 years, each of the last 3 years, 2022, 23, and 2024, there were either 320 or 360 average shootings per year in American schools. So there's 180 attendance days, and that means there's an incident happening, twice a day somewhere. Not necessarily a shooting, but there's an incident involving a gun scare, gun upset somewhere in America. And I guess over the last 4 decades, that leaves about 700 kids dead and 2,000 wounded over those years. A little different focus off of the schools for just a minute. Suicide. 27,000 people committed suicide with a gun last year. So what's that, about 70 some odd per day? About 20,000 homicides, that's 50 per day, and about 1,000 police or accidental shootings in the year. That's about 50,000 people shot to death, 130 or so every day in America. And we're just sort of cooking along with it. And regarding protection, everybody that has, or many people say, I get the gun for protection. If you look at the statistics, the suicide, homicide, and accident rate of having a gun in the home escalates dramatically. And compared to shooting an intruder, it's astronomically much more common to shoot oneself or someone else in your family than it is to ever shoot an intruder.
Well, can I pause just a minute? Do you know the exact data on that? How much more it is?
I've seen reports of it. I know there was one report in Seattle, Washington, did a survey, and I mean it was like 5% or something in the small digit numbers compared to suicide, especially, and homicide and accidents. I don't have those numbers in front of me at the moment, but I would like to talk a little more about gun violence history in the schools. So we're in Kentucky. So what was the first big school shooting in Kentucky? That was in 1997 out in Western Kentucky at Heath High School, where a 14-year-old, Michael Carneal, who was a student at the school, is being brought to school by his sister, who had been a school student. So she's their completely recognized people. He opens the car door, pops out of the car. There's a prayer vigil in front of the school. And he pops out with his 2 6-shooter 22s, not an assault weapon, just a 22. And he pops off, kills 3, shoots 6 more, throws the gun down and says he's sorry he did it. How would you possibly protect from that? I mean, he didn't go through a metal detector. The cop wasn't standing out on the street. I mean, then you need a cop in the building, a cop at the door, a cop at the bus stop, a cop at the family stop. I mean, it's impossible to stop that as long as we continue to have this number of guns and easy accessibility. You mentioned Columbine. Well, there 36 kids were shot. 36 kids, 17 of them killed, or 34. Yeah, 17 and 17 killed and wounded. But as far as stopping the kids, this is before metal detectors, before we had a lot of concern. But even if we did, how do you stop two, a 16 and a 17-year-old, big boys that are known to the school, and they're rushing in with multiple guns and bombs? So even if you confronted them and they threw a bomb and then they start shooting, I mean, somebody's going to get hurt. So, and that's 30, 30 some odd kids shot. Moved down to Sandy Hook. So now we got the doors locked. Well, Sandy Hook, the shooter, after killing his mom, he walks in, doors locked, so he shoots through the glass panels in the front of the building. And let's see, he kills 26 people by shooting through, shooting his way in. Then moved to the Stoneman shooting in Florida at the Stoneman High School. There, 17 people are shot. Let's see, 34 total, and this was all done within 4 minutes. Now, just a few weeks ago, I was visiting my grandson's school, high school. Well, there's a central pod, and then half a dozen or dozen, I don't know how many, probably just 5 or 6 wings poking out like an airport terminal thing where the things are sticking out. Well, how many cops would you need to guard all those? And it was a 2-story building, so you'd have 2 stores with multiple wings, and here this shooting all happened within 4 minutes. To shoot 34 people in 4 minutes, pretty hard to stop. And then what about the Robb Elementary School down in Uvalde, Texas? Here, an 18-year-old with an assault weapon that was legally purchased, is seen entering the school. So the school already knows something nefarious is happening. Why is this big boy, who doesn't go to school here anymore, entering the building? They call the cops. Well, ultimately, 376 cops converge on the school. They're inside the school, surrounding the school, and in the school building, standing in the hall. And over the next 73 minutes, so an hour and 10 minutes or so, hour and 13 minutes, I guess it is, he shot 36 kids while the cops were standing in the hall counting the bullets, I guess. Finally, at the 74th minute, a Texas Border Patrol agent, because Uvalde is close to the border, came and did the shooting. So the police didn't even intervene. It was a highway patrolman who just came up there on his own, I guess. And he shot the shooter. And then after that, everybody says they're really concerned about safety, and they're worried about child suicide, and they're want to improve mental health. Well, what's the proof? And then here's the other thing that sort of struck me. Then after a shooting, almost every time after a shooting, the commentators say, we're really sorry for the deceased. We're praying for the deceased. We're hoping it gets better. We're offering our sincere condolence to those involved. And this has got to stop. And then what do? They turn off the television and say, okay, I'll help the kids with their homework until dinner's ready. And that's it. If that's it, well, then that doesn't mean anything. That's just nice talk. Of course, I would say the same thing in public. I'm offering my condolence. But it doesn't mean anything if I then don't follow it up. What would be following it up? Calling your congressman, calling your legislator, talking to your mayor, city council, doing something, writing a letter to the newspaper, something like that, where there's got to be some action and not just pretty talk. Otherwise, it's just going to continue. So another little aspect of this, how did our governments react to some of these shootings? Let's talk about Uvalde. So after this 18-year-old with a legally purchased assault weapon shoots up all these kids, the legislature had a bill to raise the age of permission to have an assault weapon or purchase one to 21, and they decided that wasn't legal under the Constitution. They couldn't limit the guns to 21. They could limit them to 18. It doesn't make any sense to me, but here we go. 18-year-old shoots up the school. Texas decides that's okay to be 18 to have a gun, an assault weapon. Then let's look at the Mandalay shooting out of the Mandalay Hotel in Las Vegas in about 1997. Here, a guy with a bump stock in the 32nd floor shoots down on a concert on the bottom on the ground floor. There's a concert with scads of people. He shoots 1,000 rounds with a bump stock. He ends up injuring 413 people, killing 60, and there were 867 people injured in the melee of tripping, falling, spraining their ankle, getting stomped on, or whatever, falling down, skinning their knees, whatever it was. Okay, so that's probably the biggest shooting there was in this country. But anyway, then last year it goes to the Supreme Court and they decide bump stocks are perfectly legal. They're not machine guns, they're not automatics, because when you pull the trigger, even though it goes dit, 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 the recoil from, say, bullet one fires, recoils, and that loads and cocks shell number two.
Steve, yeah,
anyway.
Listen, I totally agree with you about guns, and I think we need to get back on that a little bit later. How about see if I could maybe change your direction a little bit.
Okay.
And maybe you could talk about what some of the mental health issues that seem to be motivating these school shooters. I mean, there's things like bullying, family dysfunction, poverty, external influence, social media. Could you give us your thoughts about, what are the motivating factors? Don't get me wrong. I want to get back to the gun issue.
No, I
but
pretty much
let's
made
just,
my point. I'm ready.
Okay, but give us some thoughts about the issues that are motivating the shooters.
Okay, well, first of all, before we even get to the shooters themselves, we have to talk about society. Society is isolated. You can go to the store without never talking to a checkout person. You can buy everything online. It gets delivered. You never even see the delivery person. Family dissolution, a polarized, angry society that's more isolated and less respectful. And looking at all this stuff without doing it tells us we have a higher tolerance for exposure to violence and not doing anything about it. I believe we have fewer shared goals, the income gap, a lot more pessimism, cynicism, and bad role models. I mean, I was thinking about Thomas Massey here in Kentucky. His Christmas card shows him family armed with big guns.
I remember that. That was terrible. but anyhow, let's get back to the motivating issues for the shooter.
Okay, that's what we're doing. But bottom line is, if there's that many guns, somebody's going to go crazy and do it.
Yes, no question. But I want to get back to that in a little while.
I think a lot of it has to do with people being isolated and angry. And they see these role models. Copycat, I think, is a big part of it. I mean, if you look back at your age and my age in school, nobody ever thought about shooting up a school. Now that's on the radar screen. We have a show. You can show how powerful you are. We have less restraint. We have a president said, I can shoot somebody on Times Square and get away with it. So I could get away with it. That kid that was arrested here in Louisville, this was his third shooting of an individuals that's known of, or at least in the newspaper that they know. Over a 2-year period, he shot at least 3 people. So, and then I think feeling betrayed and entitled is a big part of it. That you can get revenge, you can show how powerful you are. So if you're disgruntled and you've got bad role models, copycats telling you what you can do, how you can get even, how you can show how powerful you are. Now about the bullying, let's talk about that. I don't know what to think about bullying. I know that when I was in school, people were bullying all the time for race, color, national origin, religion, what country they came from, all this sort of stuff. There was a lot of bullying. I suppose that's always been true. They still didn't shoot up the schools, but there was bullying in the schools. There is one difference. We've got readily accessible guns. And there is another difference, and I don't know how to assess that, but it has to do with the internet, cell phones, FaceTime, and all that. I mean, here in Louisville, they talk about when there's a threat, all the people gather after school to see what's going to happen in the fight after school. They didn't necessarily know, not everybody knew about it before. So I don't know, cyberbullying might be a big issue. Now, I will tell you another aspect of this on the counter side. I talked to my grandkids, and I talked to a kid on the plane on the way home the other day, and some other folks that I've talked to about this. The kids say the adults are preoccupied with bullying. We're not. Now, I don't know how true that is, but that's what some of the people I've talked to have said, that the kids say they get inundated with the parents saying, don't bully, don't bully, don't bully. And so, well, we aren't, or we are, but we're not shooting each other. Anyway, and everybody says it can't happen here. It's not us, but it certainly is happening here, and it certainly is. And then I think it would be fair to say there is a small number. I mean, everybody likes to blame the mentally ill, but I don't think, statistically speaking, mentally ill people do a shooting about 5% of the time. So that means 95% are not mentally ill. So focusing on mentally ill is a nice thing to do. Should we focus on mentally ill? Of course. Do we know that mental illness insurance coverage is less good than somatic illness? Of course we know that. Do we know that people have a hard time finding a psychologist or a psychiatrist or social worker? Absolutely. Try it yourself. I frequently have to find somebody, a doctor or something, and it's a big job because it's hard to get, but that's not going to cure school violence. Is it a good thing to do? Sure. All this stuff is a good thing to do. Limiting guns would be a good thing to do. And we could talk more about that. Is that satisfactory for what I just said? Oh, I guess
Yes, sir.
there are occasions, a lot of these kids that have shot up a school then shoot themselves. Not Carneal, but a lot of them shoot themselves. Like the girl in Wisconsin, she did the shooting, then she shot herself.
Yeah.
In my professional life, I've seen other people that shoot somebody out of anger and then shoot themselves.
Yeah, Gene's got a question he wanted to ask you.
Yeah, in this particular situation, when they put themselves in a situation where they're going to get shot or shoot themselves, do you think these people are suicidal and putting themselves in a situation so that they get killed, and that they're mad and they're taking their anger out on just shooting someone, and then their end goal is to die?
Absolutely, I believe that's true. I mean, there's even a phrase for that, not just at schools, but it's called suicide by cop. So even if you don't want to shoot the cop, if you point a gun at the cop, he's going to shoot you. I think that some people do go there with the intent of suicide or to eradicate any possibility that they're going to be prosecuted, or that their family is going to be upset, or they have to go to jail or whatever. I think that's true. Some people do it for just the homicide reason.
Steve, you mentioned society early on in some of your remarks. Let me make a comment here and ask you to respond to it. The U.S., our country, has 57 times as many school shootings as other major industrialized societies. So give me a few examples, and I'm going to ask. So the question is really, what is it about our society that's different? Since 2009, the U.S. has had 288 school shootings. 288 school shootings since 2009. Canada has had 2. France has had 2. And Japan, Italy, and the United Kingdom have had none. So are there issues, societal issues driving this, or at least in my opinion, it's access to guns, and we've already talked about that, but I want to get your thoughts about whether our societal activities or environment is materially different than Canada, France, Japan, Italy, and United Kingdom.
Well, yeah, some of those countries, particularly England and Japan, they don't have much gun availability.
Yes, you're
real
absolutely
stuff.
right.
I mean, so you want to kill somebody, you got to club them to death. I mean, I studied in Britain myself over the years, and in those days, cops didn't have a gun. So a cop might be sent out to arrest a murderer, and the cop is unarmed.
They're called bobbies.
Bobbies, yeah. Well, we call them coppers. We call them coppers. So we have a little sweet name for cops too. But the bottom line is, there's a whole different attitude. Some cops now in Britain are armed.
Right.
And there are some
yes.
that are.
Yeah.
But
now what caused our society to be different than the European society? They have internet. They have all
gun
the
availability.
other
Less-
problems that would make us.
Less available.
So you think availability of guns is the number one issue?
The easy availability of it, yeah. I mean, Canada has a lot of guns too, but they have more restrictions than we do. And I'll give you an interesting other example. I studied in Switzerland. By the way, for you guys that are surgeons, I did surgery rotation in Switzerland. But anyway, when you got on the bus, every day when you got on the bus to go to school, there would be guys getting on with an assault weapon, a bandolero full of bullets, and hand grenades. They would get on the bus. Every Swiss male between, I don't know the exact ages, 18 to 60 or whatever, was in the service, and they go, when they're not, and they spend 1 or 2 weeks per year doing their training, sort of like a reserve training in this country, but they were keeping their guns. So every Swiss male had an assault weapon, a sidearm, bullets, and other kinds of weapons available in his home constantly. I remember, in fact, that and it was even the big guys. I do remember I was in surgery department. The chairman of surgery did his field rotation while I was a student there, which tells you something about how the big guys don't get to get a pass. But here's the point that answers you. Switzerland was having so much suicide, not homicide, but suicide. So there's a different mentality. I don't know. Swiss men were shooting themselves. So finally, a few years ago, Switzerland decided you can't take the gun home. And if you do, you have to buy it. Well, that drastically dropped the number of firearms that went home when they weren't on duty. And the suicide rate has dropped. Now, that doesn't talk about school shootings or other shootings, but they weren't doing that anyway. But
I lived in Switzerland for 3 years, and I agree with you. Switzerland has been a gun-friendly country since the time of Napoleon, but the people there are trained. There are restrictions about who has a gun. If you want to buy a gun in Switzerland, you have to go through this process. It includes an interview, a training process, and you can only buy one gun at a time. You can't go into a gun store and buy 15 AR-15s and take them across the border in Texas and give them to the cartels the way we do in this country. Now, I absolutely agree with you about the issue of guns. I wanted us to talk about some of the other issues surrounding, this whole school shooting thing. Let me ask you another question. Should parents be held responsible for providing a weapon to an adolescent who carries out gun shootings, school shootings? whether
I would like to talk about that, but you might curl your hair when I talk.
well, it's okay.
All right, here we go. I think that obviously what we need to do to curb gun violence, I'm going to first be a little global. We need the president, the governor, the mayor, all these people talking about it on a regular basis, like a fireside chat every week, about how the importance of safe storage and being responsible. Americans like to talk about accountability and responsibility. Well, hello, here we go. So part of this responsibility ought to be safe storage, safe, secure storage. Usually the recommendations mean gun in the attic locked up unloaded and the ammunition in the basement unloaded. Oh, in some states in America now you can start to buy ammunition in a vending machine. So, the availability is a big issue. And then, of course, the family needs to be responsible. So I would say if your child or any unauthorized person gets a hold of your gun and there's just a minor incident, maybe just they find a gun in his backpack or whatever, that should be a charge of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. There then should be Child Protective Services should come into the home and check whether there's neglect or ability for continued custody. Now, and if somebody actually gets hurt or a gun goes off, it gets worse. Then you're contributing to the delinquency of a minor. You have to compensate the school for fixing the windows that were shot out or the family that got shot or hurt. There ought to be jail time for that kind of thing. And then fines and punishment. And in my one understanding that I have about fines in America, you see where some rich guy gets charged with some serious crime and he say, okay, your fine is $500. Well, he just pulls that out of his billfold and he's done. I think the fine in this kind of case should be proportionate to the income. So if you're a millionaire, it might be $500,000 fine. If you're a school teacher, maybe it's $30,000, something like that, where it really makes a difference. But we need to be accountable. Then if there's a killing, I would say then it would be reckless homicide or negligent homicide on the part of the owner. And that goes a little further than that. As far as accountability, if we said 200,000 guns are stolen every year, then I would say, if we want to be accountable, your gun's stolen, you should report that to the cops, have a written proof that you called the police in your community and said, my gun, serial number 2205, whatever, was stolen. Then if that gun pops up 2 years later in unauthorized hands, it's your problem, it's your gun. So if you want to be responsible, then be responsible. And the part about one single gun at a time is really important. I know there's a famous conduit. Washington, D.C. has some very strict gun laws, but Virginia doesn't. Well, there's a little bridge across the Potomac. So it's about like going to Indiana from Louisville. I mean, it's just walk across the bridge and you can sell all your guns. So, and one thing also about proclivity for shooting, I guess you would have to throw in testosterone. I mean, it's not as many girls shooting up schools. It's mostly boys.
Gene?
If Trump appointed you the czar next week after the 20th for school shootings, and your job is to try to prevent school shootings, what would you do?
Well, I sort of covered a lot of that, but I'll sort of run over it. Number one would be we need to have the chief executives of your state, city, and nation talking about it and making that an issue, sort of like the Surgeon General did about smoking or something, but a little more frequently. I mean, Sir Everett Koop said that about 20 years ago, and we still have some smoking, but it's a lot less. But if you have maybe like Bashir did during Corona, that coming on TV every week and saying, here's where we stand with gun shooting. Oh, there was another one. This person was punished, whatever the deal is. But making that a major issue where the whole country is confronted and we need to stop this. Not just every time there's a shooting, we say, that's not us. It's really those other guys. So that would be the first thing. And then safe storage, I think, should be emphasized. Safe storage, without safe storage, and then responsibility, accountability for the owner. And then you could go through all the other stuff about age requirement, raising the age for assault weapons, background checks, red flag, all those other tightening gun carry numbers. I mean, all that stuff is important. But let me just talk about some of those things just for a second. If you think about the value of a red flag law, that is practically irrelevant. Everybody says, oh, we need red flag laws. Well, in the first place, you have to go to court. You have to force, the judge has to adjudicate you as dangerous, and then you're supposed to give up your guns. But can you imagine anybody who's really in a situation like that couldn't go to his neighbor and say, oh, I'm going hunting this weekend. Could I borrow your gun for a day? He doesn't know you're on an EPO, on an emergency protective order. I mean, and it's not old adults who are on EPOs that are shooting up the schools. It's kids in the school or kids that went to that school. So, I mean, red flags are not important. And background checks, as long as you have all these guns stolen every year, I mean, a background check is sure. All those things are nice. All those things are good ideas. All those things chip at the edges. It would make a difference in the next decade or two, but they're not going to have any impact on school violence in the near future.
Well, let me ask you about a couple other things that have been proposed. Resource officers in the schools, teachers with guns, and metal detectors in schools. Do you think that would make a difference? Any of those?
All those things are going to chip at the edges, but teachers with guns, I think that would be dangerous. I don't know about you guys, but when I was 16, if my biology teacher, I remember her, she used to wear a house dress, and she has a gun strapped on in school. I mean, come on. One of the guys is going to grab her left arm, I'll grab her right arm, and somebody else will have the gun. Not necessarily to kill anybody, but having a little old 55-year-old lady armed in the school is going to be dangerous, I think.
We asked, my oldest daughter is a school teacher in New York in Spanish Harlem, and she is absolutely clear about this. The last thing that any teacher wants to do is carry a firearm. I mean, these are nutty ideas that come from ideologically, I'm not going to, politicians with a different ideology. Let's put it this way. Now, if I remember correctly, and I'm to our listeners, I'm not really clear about the total accuracy about this, but I believe that when the assault weapon ban was put in place during the Clinton administration, and then that was lifted in, I think it was 2009. If you go back and look at that time frame, the difference between the number of shootings, school shootings, mass shootings, and the amount of damage done during that time frame compared to after the assault weapon bans were lifted, I think that's probably one of the first and most important issues that needs to be done in this country with gun control, is that we ban weapons of war, and people, if they're going to, you go through all the other steps of background checks and red flag laws and everything else like that, but I don't think there's any reason why anybody should be carrying an AR-15, an M16, or any one of these assault weapons.
Well, that sounds like a great thing to say, but if there's 20 million of them, what are you going to do about that?
No, well, other countries, they bought them back. Australia bought them back after they had it was about 20 years ago. Some guy ran into a park somewhere and shot a bunch of people, and the Australians took care of that. They banned them, and they bought them back, and other countries have done that as well.
Well, I suppose you could do that. I'm not sure how well that would work, but yeah, sure. All those things. Every one of those things is a good idea. It's just a matter of how quick is it going to do something.
Well, the problem is the politicians in this country. There's a supermajority in the legislature in Kentucky, and they I don't know what the law is, but they have made it impossible for the urban communities to manage gun access.
Well, we're the politicians. We voted for those people. I mean,
absolutely
whether you
right.
voted or I voted, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is America voted that way. So that you get what you pay for. We're the politicians. We voted them in. They're doing what we tell them to do.
I understand. I didn't vote for that, but there are people out there that have, which is, in my opinion, is crazy.
It might be. Some people voted against Vietnam. Some people voted in favor of it. I mean, yeah, but the country is going that way at this moment. Now, you asked about metal detectors. A metal detector has one purpose. All it does, it goes bing, bing, bing if there's a big metal object coming in. It doesn't even tell you whether it's a gun. It just says bing, bing, bing. There's a piece of metal coming through the door. Not counting the fact that you can have plastic guns and other kinds of ceramic weapons, whatever. But then it only would work if you have armed policemen at the door.
Yeah, you would have to have some type of police monitoring that metal detector.
Well, having an armed policeman at the door, a kid that goes to a school that has multiple doors knows that there are other ways you can get in and out of the school. So, I mean, I don't even think that's a sensible option because you'd need five.
It probably reduces things a little bit because it's like at the airplane. You say, oh, I better not take my gun. But I don't think it would make a major difference. And that kid, that Sandy Hook guy, they had the door locked, so he just walked through the window area.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you a question.
Wait, before that you said metal detectors, teachers, and one more thing. What was the third one?
Resource officers. And,
that's policemen.
Yeah.
I don't think I think my favorite example would be if 73 minutes went by while 370 cops were in the building. It didn't make too much difference in Uvalde. And how would, I know my high school in Texas, they build the schools long ways, not up. Not compact. So it was probably 150 yards from the gym to the English department. And you're going to have 10 cops in every building in every school every day for 7 hours a day. That's just impossible.
Yeah. Now, have you or any of your psychiatrist colleagues ever interviewed one of these people who've done mass shootings? If you know anybody or if you've ever done that, can you give us a little insight of what motivates these people to do these kind of things?
I think we've talked about that. Revenge, anger, hopelessness, cynicism. It's hopeless for me to ever get better. I'm going to go down in glory and show how powerful I am. I can take out more people than you did. I think all that stuff is part of it.
Okay, why are people feeling so hopeless when, if you look at the data, for example, there was one economically, America is way above any other country in the world. Even our basic salaries are higher than most other countries. So why are we feeling so hopeless, and why do we in so much despair when we're actually living probably in the best time there's ever been in history?
Well, it's probably true there are less people starving to death, but there's a tremendous income gap and racial gap and religious gap. And those things are being harped on, and I think that makes people angry. And they were more isolated. How many families grow up in single-family homes?
So what do you think has brought that on? Why do we have so many people who are living alone, who are so isolated compared to, say, 40 or 50 years ago?
Well, some of it's pretty obvious that you can do all your shopping online. You can get your gas without talking to the gas station. Even in the last 15 or 20 years, when you went to the gas station, somebody checked your oil, wiped your windows if you wanted. Do you want me to check your tires? When you went to Kroger, you had to talk to the to the person there. And I'll just give a little bit of a sidelight on that. The other day, my wife was at Kroger, and somebody walked into the line with a 38 strapped to his side. Well, everybody in line got quiet because they thought, "Oh my gosh!" Even if the person in front is going to argue about the bill, maybe this guy's going to take offense. So everybody's petrified. I mean, all that stuff is, and we have this stand your ground. So you could have gone into that grocery store that day and said, "He scared me so much I shot him," and it's okay because I'm just standing my ground. All that thing, all those things, I think lead to pessimism, and I'm right and you're wrong.
Now,
I think the income gap is another big issue. I think that a lot of people feel hopeless and hopeless, and I'm not going to be able to get ahead. They're pessimistic. They don't have optimism for the future.
there's a lot of data out there that show that men are more isolated. They don't socialize. Just give you an example. When I was growing up, my parents played cards with a group of other people at least once a week. They had close social network, church, business, clubs, etc. Why have we lost that? What's contributed to that? Is it only the internet, or are there other factors?
Money.
Money.
I think some of it's money, and then I think Corona made it worse too. I mean, all the Zoom. Here we are on a Zoom. Come on, I never heard of Zoom 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I mean, the surgery, medicine department, psychiatry, they all offer their grand rounds on Zoom. Well, wait a minute.
Okay.
I remember my whole career that the biggest thing about grand rounds is I got to talk to so and so, give so and so my paper, make an appointment with the other one, blah blah blah. Now just do it online in your underpants in your living room.
All right, 2 minutes. 2 minutes left.
As a isolated male retired surgeon, what can I do to increase my social interaction? What should I do? How could retired people or every man go about increasing their relationship with people?
Well, I'll give you one example I've noticed with my wife. When she goes to Kroger, she doesn't go to the isolated checkout. She always goes to the checkout guy.
Okay.
I mean, do things with people. Go to the library. Join a school committee. I mean, I don't know. Be a Boy Scout leader. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, guys, we're down at the end of the lollipop here. I want to make one more comment, and then Paul's going to take us out. You know, with all this discussion, I think it is very clear the biggest problem we have in this country about school shooting is access to guns. The biggest problem, and unfortunately the politicians in this country often in both parties are ideologic Neanderthals when it comes to this. Steve, thank you very much. You are an excellent guest. This has been a very interesting conversation.
I agree, Mike. Thank you again, Dr. Lippmann, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. And please come back next time for Single Payer Radio. Have a wonderful rest of your day.